Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Logify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.
Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Leo. How's it going?
It's great. Yeah, it's very nice to see you. How have you been? How's your week been?
Yeah, really good. Probably a lot less busy than yours. I'm sure you're a little bit jet lagged. Being at VRMA all week. I can't wait to hear all the gossip.
Yeah, that's right. So come on, before we talk about my epic adventures and the amount of travel I've been doing, you obviously deliciously didn't have to do all that travel and go to Burma. So what have you done? Have you had coffee, gone to exercise class? Come on, tell me everything.
I did. I had coffee. I'm back on my exercise routine. I went to my butt class this morning. The one
Nice.
that's like 45 minutes of squats and torture for the lower half. And I also, I don't know if we have talked about this. I signed up, I don't know, I guess like 6 weeks ago for improv classes. I used to do theater when I was younger, and I did improv when I was in university. And I went several months ago. I was walking by and saw a bunch of fun people outside on the street. And I thought, gosh, you guys look like you're having fun. And they were like, oh, we're an improv group. And I was like, oh, I'm going to sign up for that. So I went to a show and then asked, like, how do you get involved? And they're like, oh, we have classes. So I signed up for class. So I've been doing that. And I have my big showcase debut tonight, Leo. So,
That's so cool. I
yeah,
love that. I
I'm gonna
genuinely
get
love
stage.
That's brilliant. I imagine you're fantastic at that. So when we say showcase, so does that mean there's an audience who have sort of paid to be here and be entertained by you?
There's an audience. Yeah, yeah. So I've invited my friends, because I figure I'd rather know people in the audience, I guess, than have it be full of strangers. It's not a huge theater. There might be 50 people that can fit in there in the audience, but still, it'll be fun. And it's in English, so that is helpful, even though my Spanish is fluent. I think humorous improv things are always easier in one's mother tongue.
I love it. I love it. That's so cool. We had an offsite in Austin in June and we did a little bit of it. And I liked it. So I, unsurprisingly, I also did a little bit of theatre at school growing up. And so I do often think it'd be nice to scratch that itch. Oh, good for you. Now, does this mean if it's good, it's going to end up on YouTube? Can people watch it? Where can they watch it?
I don't think anyone can watch it, thank God. If if I have anything particularly funny to come out of my mouth, then maybe I'll put up a clip or something. But maybe we'll get a photo. How about that?
Good,
I'll
good for
promise a
you.
photo.
Okay, Sarah, great. And then exercise-wise, you referenced butt class. I was thinking the other day, you know, we've talked about this before. You and I have talked about this. You've met me a few times, so you can say I'm a bit lacking in the butt department, and I feel like I need to be going to butt class. But I wonder if there's any saving me, or if I've just got to accept that's me for life. I was even thinking maybe there was a business idea in providing trousers and pants and just general underwear for people who suffer with my affliction. But that's one to think about. Maybe off podcast. Who knows? Maybe that's not right for the audience. But Sarah, anyway, 45 minutes of butt class. I mean, you're back in the good routines. Well done. The good habits. What's inspired all this?
So I think for me, it started to get cold in Barcelona. I mean, I say cold, like 16 degrees, which for me is cold. Um, and so I've got my jumpers out, and I feel like that is the perfect time to be in a routine. It gets dark early. We're about to turn our clocks back. It's just a nasty time of year where there's nothing better to do than get in shape and go to the gym. And
Love
movie,
it.
of course. Yeah, that is my that's my inspiration. Cold weather and no need to be out on a terrace having a glass of wine because it's too cold.
Makes me think, Sarah, that you would do really well living in London. You'd be exercising 12 months of the year if you lived in London, because that's all we have. Nasty weather.
You say that. But the mental strain, no, that's my theory why, I think generally people who are in the northernest parts of the hemisphere, or the coldest place or the southernest parts, I guess, that are the coldest, tend to be more productive because there's nothing better to do except sit inside, and get some work done, you
True.
know?
It's
That's
true.
like where it's like Spain, Italy, Greece, well, nice weather, let's be out on a terrace having a glass of wine.
Yeah, you're right. So our lives are so miserable. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that. We're just miserable,
You're welcome,
productive
that's
people, aren't we?
it's a theory, just a
Yeah.
theory.
Any property managers in the northern part of Europe versus the southern part? Tell us more. Tell us more about these theories from Sarah. So I was quite well behaved here. I flew to Phoenix at the weekend and had an amazing time at VRMA. And we were getting up every morning, jogging around Phoenix. One morning we got up and we hiked up a mountain. And that was the Sunday I arrived. So I hiked up a mountain for sunrise, then went and messed around in the desert on like an off-road Jeep type thing, and then finished the day swimming in a lake in the desert. And so I had this like
Hold on.
amazing day. Oh, gone.
I'm still on the off Jeep, Leo. I need to know more about this. Did you wear one of those bandanas, like and then the glasses, and then you look like one of those criminals? I need
Absolutely.
photos.
Yeah, I went full in. I went full out on this thing, right? I had the bandana, I was ragging it around the desert. I mean, look, I live in central London. Like I have a tiny little car and I stop at stoplights every like 10 minutes. This is the most wild thing I've ever done. And the guys were like that sort of showing me how to use the Jeep beforehand and I was like, I've never even driven a car that's bigger than like a tiny little city car. I mean, it was epic. Um, and so yeah, it was good. It was good. We were fighting the jet lag, and then at the end of the day, we were like, right, come on, let's go and swim in a lake because there's these brilliant lakes as well. So we drove out some of the lakes. Amazing desert day. And then of course I made the mistake of phoning my partner, and to tell her what a great day I'd had while she was trying to wrangle two kids and do bath time and bedtime and say, look, I thought it was a work trip. And I was like, good point. It was a work trip. And then I had to pretend I'd been networking when really I hadn't. So that was the own goal for me anyway. But then we got into VRMA proper and we were still up jogging every morning. So I'm feeling like we are being quite well behaved. And you know what? It was a great VRMA. I think it's fair to say that there was a few less people there than the year before. Interesting because we know that there's maybe a market correction going on at the moment and some folks are going through some more difficult times. So perhaps that's why. But the folks that were there were very buoyant and very interested to talk about growth and the industry. And I feel that this year, more than any other year, the conversation around market channel diversification was more advanced than ever. So it wasn't just like, oh, I use Airbnb and I use Booking.com, I use Verbo, and I'm trying to get direct bookings. Because all that really means is you've got a website and you're still paying Google if all you're doing is doing SEO. I felt like the conversation had slightly evolved from being, well, I'm actually trying to find who my ideal guest persona is and then work out if my property is right for them and, build a style of property for that persona. So people were talking about like, using corporate OTAs, making deals with local businesses, midterm rentals, film studio rentals, film shoots. It was very, very cool because people were, I think, seeing their properties as being the asset, seeing them as what they had and how they had to showcase them and how could they showcase them. And I thought, wow, that's a real sort of like point where the industry's growing up. And
Love that.
likewise, yeah. Sorry, go on. I'll let you give your thoughts on that.
Well, no, I love that because I think it's something that we often talk about on here, which is how do you set yourself apart? And what is it that's so special about vacation rentals that is different to hotels? And that ultimately is what's going to keep us and our industry afloat and keep us relevant. And so it's really great to hear that people are starting to think about, okay, I have this rental and sure, I could have families or I could have whoever here. It really now has become, okay, what is the USP that I have at my property? What's my unique selling proposition here? And how can I turn that into something cool? Because I think that's the beauty of short-term rentals, that they are all unique in their own ways. And so I think it's really, really great that people are starting to really ideate on that even further.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. For me, it was a real cool. There's some really cool conversations around it, and I enjoyed it. And I think that to further that, I was also seeing people wanting to talk about upsells and guest revenue and how they not just from a commercial perspective, but also curating the in-stay guest experience. So adding excursions, activities, amenities. So there was this like, how do we level up? How do we raise our game? Again, like you say, to be powerful in competition with hotels, but also to get more value out of a booking. So people are really firmly fixed on this idea that like when you get the guest in, that's the first bit. If you can sell something to them during, even better, because you might be able to double, triple, quadruple your commission that you thought was possible from a booking if you're suddenly able to monetize in stay. Had a really interesting conversation with someone about how it was with someone who has one of these upsell platforms about how one of the highest selling items for them is additional nights. So you get your booking on the OTA, and then people realize when they're in stay, they can add additional nights within the app, and they do it, which I thought was very, very cool. So it's kind of a way of getting more involved with that customer journey. And again, just again, the OTAs wouldn't like it, but it's a way of crystallizing that the guest is your guest. They're in your property. Make the most of it like that. Try and monetize and build that experience.
Also, what a great way to fill like days that were not previously reserved, to fill those kind of orphan days between reservations. Hey, by the way, like if you're having a good time, extend your stay. And I think that is one of the beautiful things about, we've talked about this often. I'm not a huge fan of this, like, go work in an exotic location because I don't think anybody enjoys that. Maybe some people do, but I just get more miserable that I'm stuck working in a beautiful location. Uh, but there are people who, maybe you go on holiday and because you have the option to extend your trip by 2 more days and you brought your laptop, then, why wouldn't you? Especially if you're offered some kind of incentive, like whether that be a discount or whether that be, I don't know, some kind of extra activity that you can do over those days, or like, hey, why don't you stay another night because there's a concert that might be of interest to you or some kind of cultural event. So you can kind of tie those things in. So I just, yeah, I think it's a really cool idea.
If you're in a drive-to market as well, why not? Because
Yeah.
say you can flog someone, say, "Oh, it's only $50 just the ad." Say you give them a really good rate, they just drive back the next day. I would totally do that. Jasmine and I
Yeah.
are forever like wanting to. We go somewhere and we don't want to leave. We start, and once we've unpacked
Well,
the car and unpacked the kids, you're like, God, I just want to stay longer and longer. So that would certainly work for me. It only doesn't work if you book trains or planes, which is often the way in Europe. But a drive-to market, I would imagine the conversion is really high on that.
yeah, really neat. I like it.
So yeah, it was a good
Any other
VRMA. I enjoyed it, Sarah, and also I got some time with our American cousins in the GMH family. So I got to record some stuff with Will. I got to record some stuff with Brandy, and Sarah, you'll be jealous to learn because obviously we missed you there. You'll be jealous to learn we had major contributor to the show, Paul Stevens, on, and we had Paul actually do a live. Instead of just being the journalist who we reference, he was there, which was amazing. It was phenomenal fun.
Oh, I love Paul. Yay, I can't wait. I can't wait
You'll
to
see all
review that
that.
one. I haven't had a chance
Yeah.
to see it yet. So
You'll
I'm gonna go back and review after today.
Yeah, you'll see all that. You'll see all that good stuff. Well, look, let's get into it. I've had a great week, and it's inspired me to sort of crack on and keep building what we're building for the industry that's growing. Interesting news. So I've got a couple of quick SDR highlights that caught my eye this week, and then we're going to go on and really deep dive the Airbnb launch of the co-host marketplace. And I know Sarah's going to have a lot to say about this because this is big. I think this is groundbreaking for the industry. Like, could really shift the traditional management model in huge ways. But before we do that, first thing that caught my eye this week, Bob W. always seems to be doing smart things. And in my opinion, they've done a very smart thing here by hiring Hervé Delingy as their CFO. So
Mm.
Hervé is someone I know from his One Pint Stay days. We crossed over there. And Hervé comes with bags and bags of experience from Accor, so the hotel world, the hostel world, and then clearly the short-term rental world. And what I think is really smart about this appointment is clearly for Bob W., we've talked about it in previous episodes, they are probably going after a lot of that market that would have been originally taken by hotels. So when new building contracts come up and there's a chance to convert things into either residential or short-term rental or a hotel, they're involved in these deals. And I think Hervé is clearly going to be someone that can help them make sure that they understand their cost of service and how they can do that in a scalable way. So I would say watch this space. I think that's a really significant appointment for the space. And then the other one that caught my eye is something that you and I talk about a lot, Sarah. So not that I feel like I'm trying to validate what we say, so I don't want it to come across this way, but we have been saying for a while the trend to look out for around sustainability, is looking at outdoor accommodation, lodges, cabins, campsites. And we're seeing evidence of it here because French outdoor hospitality firm Hotopia closes a 13 million euro investment. And I think this is really cool. So clearly, here we go. People wanting to get away from the crowd. So the over tourism media, the press around over tourism is definitely getting through to certain people. They want to beat the crowds, not be right in amongst them. Clearly, for property people, it's away from the glare of regulation. And I think, given how digital our lives are, I think, Sarah, you made this point. It's the unplugging holiday, right, where you turn your phone off and you crack on. So, yeah, decent, significant round of investment for a company that's been around since 1999. So, this is interesting. This is really interesting. They've been around a while, but they're seeing this as a moment to double down and capture more of a market. And we'll see where it gets to. But as a family, traveling as a family is something that we're always looking for. When you look on their site, they've got chalets, they've got cabins in the wood as well as campsites. So, yeah, I think this is really cool. And if I was um, a property manager, someone who bought property, invested in that way, I can imagine lots of people are thinking, well, I want to be buying cabins in the wood. I want to be building. I want to be buying land and building my own things, because why wouldn't you right now? It just feels like the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think, and I'll be keen to kind of keep an eye on this, but kind of where I don't think people are going to stop traveling to major European cities. I just think the way that they travel to those cities is going to change. So, where historically maybe you would do a bunch of city trips, you might do, I don't know, one night in the major city. Let's say you spend a night in Siena or in Venice or in wherever, and then you go somewhere in the outskirts and you have more of like a nature holiday. And if you want to visit a big city because maybe you're flying into that, as we talked about earlier, or maybe you have a train and you have a connection through there. So I think that's just going to change the way that we travel overall. I don't think it's going to remove the demand, but hopefully it'll help release some of that over tourism pressure, because people have other options and they can combine it with other things. So I'm keen to see kind of how that shifts
I totally
demand.
agree. I totally agree, Sarah. It's just diversifying the area within your region, which we've spoken about a few times, and then also potentially deseasonalizing as well, right? So, like, come and have an autumn in the woods, and come into the city for a couple of days. I mean, we're just back. We're not long back from our family holiday in France, which was we chose to September, not August, because our kids aren't in school, so we don't have to be led by the summer holidays, school holidays. And we stayed in a smaller town, but we traveled around in the car and went to markets in busier towns. So yeah, it's that idea that as an accommodation option, maybe people are thinking, oh, isn't it nice to, when I get back at the end of the day from being in the busy town, I'm in the forest and I've got the pool, or I'm at the campsite with my kids. So yeah, cool. I agree. Definitely one to watch.
Awesome. Great. Do we get to dive in? I'm ready to dive in, Leo. I'm really
Eric,
excited
tell us,
about this.
yeah, tell us all, buddy. Tell us all.
Leo. Awesome. I don't even know where to start in terms of the credit for this article because it's everywhere. So the one I'll base it on was an article in FocusWire, but I've read through really similar release and Skift, same in rental scale up. So it's everywhere. If you haven't heard, and you have been living under a rock, Airbnb has officially launched the co-hosting program. So let's talk about why they're launching this. Basically, there are so many one unit hosts available out on the market that nobody is helping. And this segment with just one listing is growing 15% year over year. So there's a whole lot more people getting involved that are not professional. They're not listing their property with a professional manager. And that's not good for Airbnb necessarily, because the first time you do something, you're probably not going to be great at it. And so I think their interests are aligned with really raising the standards. And that's how they've kind of pitched this, is the goal is to ultimately raise standards so that when somebody says, because we all know Airbnb has become a verb, it's become a house name. Oh, I'm Airbnb-ing, or I'm going to get an Airbnb, even if you booked it on another OTA sometimes. And so I think they're finally recognizing that that brand name really has to do with the quality. And so one bad listing or one bad experience can potentially damage that brand image. So that is my sort of get additional 2 cents on why I think they're doing it. um, the other cool thing about this program is because they've had a co-hosting program for a long time, right? This is nothing new. The idea that you can have a co-host on Airbnb and try and find somebody to help manage your property. Where it gets interesting is that they have now launched an algorithm, because everybody's into AI these days, that looks at 80 different factors to recommend you a co-host that is the best co-host for your property. And so it looks at things like obviously the location of the property, but also the experience of that host. What other types of homes are in their portfolio or that they have listed historically. Um, and then of course the satisfaction of the guest. But 80 different factors I think is super interesting. So I think the goal here is really using AI and using technology to find that sort of perfect match between these co-hosts. Um, and then the other thing that I thought was really interesting about this, because my initial thought was, oh my gosh, it's going to ruin our industry, right? This is a threat. Um, I don't believe that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why and would love to get your opinion as well, Leo. But first of all, the commissions that typically are charged by co-host is between 17 and 20% of the total revenue. Most PMs in the space, depending on, I guess, the level of service for full service management, I mean, most of the fees I see are between 20 and 30%. And so it's not super far off from standard management fees. So that's one of the reasons that I don't believe it's a threat. The other thing is, and they were asked this question point blank on the earnings call and on the release, in the press release, was who can participate? So can a professional property management company participate? And the answer was basically yes. You have to have a specific host. So it has to be tied to a person and their personal account on Airbnb, but that person can work for a property management company. So essentially, yes, property managers are not excluded from participating in the program. What Airbnb did point out, and we have spoken about this numerous times on the podcast, was the fact that in the case of many large property managers, they don't meet the standards. So the average rating for a large property manager, which they didn't define, of course, but let's say that that is above, I don't know, 100 listings, between 100 and 300 listings and more, tends to have an average rating of 4.62 for their properties. And the minimum required for this co-host program is a 4.8. So it doesn't mean that we're excluded. It just means that if people in our industry are going to participate, we have to step up our game and we just have to be better. So in a weird way, I think that's good. I think it's going to help us maintain that we talk about, especially in Europe, hyper-local teams, hyper-local approach, really focusing on quality. And ultimately, I think, rising tide lifts all ships. So I think that is going to improve the quality overall of all short-term rentals. We can talk about magnitude as well, and kind of like what is out there to be up for grabs. The most of the stats quoted are for the US, but Europe, you're looking at similar percentages there. So Airbnb is launching the marketplace currently with 10,000 co-hosts, and they're doing that in 10 countries. So US, UK, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, Spain, Italy, Germany, and France. Yeah. And then they're going to kind of see how this goes and then plan to add more countries as it becomes more successful. The potential market share is where this, for me, shows a huge opportunity for our industry if we do it properly. So of the 1.7 million short-term rental listings on Airbnb and Vrbo in the US, only about 20% of those, so just over 300,000, are managed by a property manager. The flip side of that is that about 25% of hosts have some sort of partial management. And so I think the opportunity in this is twofold. One, there are some properties and some locations where we can swoop in, have a 20% fee, which is more in line with kind of what the industry is used to in some locations, do a full service management, become a co-host, and that is sort of apples to apples. The other opportunity that I see is in that huge portion of the market. So that's 75% that doesn't have anybody helping with their property. So these are single unit hosts that just think, I'm going to try and do it on my own. And most of that comes down to fees. So they don't want the hassle of having to look for a management company, or they don't want the higher fees. And so I think that leaves open a different sort of model. That I've been seeing this pop up in Europe as well over the last couple of years in particular, which is more of like a concierge sort of model where it's not full service property management. There's different services and each service has a certain percentage and you can kind of pick and choose and it's more a la carte of exactly what you need. So maybe you only need help with, listing the property on the platform and doing pricing and things like that, but you have a smart lock, so you don't need help with the check-in and somebody in the area that can do the cleaning, and so you can handle that yourself, right? So I think those are the two big opportunities. I feel like I've been talking on a long, long monologue, so I'll let you,
Y-
I'll let
You know,
you opine, Leah.
I actually could keep listening to you talking about it. I think what you're saying is really interesting. So never feel like you're monologuing, Sarah. Come on, this is me. It's me you're talking to. I love to hear you talk. Because it's so significant. And I agree with everything you're saying. I like what Simon said. So obviously, Simon Lehman, friend of the show, sometimes contributor, helped with our review of the industry a couple of weeks ago. He says, quoted in the Focus Wire article, saying, "This is not simply a new service; it's a shift in power dynamics." While this model offers convenience and cost saving for property owners, it represents a serious challenge to the traditional property manager. And then he goes on to say, with Airbnb providing a marketplace to match these co-hosts directly with property owners, the traditional management model is being undercut in ways that may soon become impossible to ignore. And he's right. This Airbnb have the scale to
Mm-hmm.
genuinely be impactful when it comes to being where hosts might go to to see what the gold standard is for who is the best co-host for them. So it really democratizes the management model. We talk about anyway. We talked about the fact the barrier to entry in this industry is super low. It's zero to become a host, and it's kind of becoming even lower to become a co-host slash property manager. Like you don't need to have as much of your stuff in place. And why I think Airbnb has chosen to do this is because if they can democratize co-hosting to the point where people can just do, like you said, one of the services for their host to take away the hassle, or more than one and do the whole management for them. I think Airbnb's bet is that they can keep them just using the Airbnb platform and
Yeah.
not using the different OTAs.
That's an interesting one and one that I'm really curious about because I know a lot of times, so for example, when Airbnb years ago launched their Airbnb Plus program, one of the requirements of being part of the Airbnb Plus program is that you cannot list on another OTA. And so I think what you're saying is super interesting and I can absolutely see them going that direction. It didn't even occur to me. I haven't read the T's and C's of being a co-host, but I would not be surprised if in order to participate in this program, you cannot list your property on any other OTAs. I think that would present a challenge for some of the property managers, of course, unless the rule is just for that co-host, in which case it's a bit of a gray area.
Well, I think
But
even
I
if
would
it's not mandated, I think it's just you maybe take away people's desire to look elsewhere and have that jumping off period. So it could have ramifications for the wider industry as well, because when someone gets to the point where they're engaging a property manager, the property manager takes their listing detail, puts it on a PMS, and puts it all over the internet, and they get welcomed in the monetized short-term rental arena. That's where things like best upsell products come into play, and AI chatbots and guest comms and things like that. And I don't think it will stop that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be overly dramatic about it. I still think most people, when a property manager uses this co-host service to advertise their service, which will undoubtedly happen, whether they suddenly go by their name and not by their property management company name, which will definitely happen. They will find ways to pull them into the other booking channels. But what I'm saying is, I think the people that aren't already property managers working on multiple channels don't have PMSs. The ones that are just hosts on Airbnb but have a bit of time on their hands to co-host and might only want 2 or 3 people, or might even want just one person to look after. That democratization undoubtedly is going to shift. It is a shift in power dynamics, and that's where I think Simon's coming from. It's like, and there are, like you said, a ton of people that have never engaged with the industry. They just use Airbnb. I think, again, to repeat, I think Airbnb's bet is let's control that transition to them working with a co-host and try
Mhm.
to keep it within Airbnb structure, and let's control the co-host and try and keep them within the Airbnb structure. And if they pull it off, wow, it could be huge. So I think it's super interesting. And I guess in many ways, a natural evolution for a company that's done incredibly well to dominate the market that it dominates. So I think it's hard to ignore. I think it really is hard to ignore. And I would be keen to hear from our listeners who are co-hosts, property managers around Europe. Like, have you had a look at this yet? I spoke to one American friend of mine last night on WhatsApp, and he's a property manager slash co-host, and he's already on it and has already had a few referrals. Um, but as himself, not as his property management company. So yeah, I'd be keen to know, listeners in Europe, tell us, have you engaged with this? Have you looked at it? Do you have a strategy for it? I think this is something we'd like to revisit.
I also wonder, Leo, if this is going to have an impact on Airbnb's sort of brand name and association with the impact of over tourism. Because if you think about it, what this program really does is it makes it so much easier to have a property in a remote location or in a more remote location. It's always been pretty easy. Like, great, I want to buy a property in, obviously, you can't do it now, but I want to buy a property in Barcelona. There's so many property management companies to choose from. You're not going to have an issue finding somebody to manage that property for you. Whereas if I have a property an hour and a half outside the city in a more rural location, that may be really difficult for me to find an actual management company who has the infrastructure set up to go out there and do that. So I think that is one of the other benefits potentially of this program, um,
I
in
like
terms of
that.
expand.
I
Why?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good thought. Again, one for us to watch. Yeah, does it help bring rural secluded supply into the ecosystem, and does it, in Airbnb's bet, make it just end up being exclusively Airbnb inventory? That remains to be seen. But yeah, I hope so. I hope it does, because yeah, I think lots of people do associate Airbnb as being the urban phenomenon because it is so much easier to get your property managed. I'd never thought about it from that angle before.
I'm looking around as well, just as we're chatting, because I am impatient and don't want to wait until after the show to look it up. I've been looking around. I don't see anything so far in the T's and C's. So please, if anybody knows something to the contrary, please let us know. Uh, but I don't see anything in the T's and C's that makes that co-hosting agreement exclusive. For at least for the property, the main property of the person who is doing the co-hosting. So I don't see anywhere where they can't necessarily also list that property, for example, on Booking.com or on Vrbo or another OTA. It's just that Airbnb is the first of the OTAs to kind of officially launch this type of program. That's another thing I'm curious to see, is if it really has, legs and takes off. Is it going to happen at other OTAs as well? They tend to follow each other's lead. So,
It's
or do we think it's something exclusive to Airbnb and the brand? Do we think they're the only ones that can? Well,
I think they're the only ones that can pull it off, I must say, because, Vrbo and Booking are so linked to, like, well, Vrbo is Expedia and it's corporate and it's got the hotel on. Booking.com is just everything, right? It's car rental as well as hotels. So I do think, again, smart move, right? It's doing something that your competitors probably can't do. Very interesting. Very interesting. Sarah, we could talk about this all day. We are out of time. It's been so nice catching up with you. I missed you in Phoenix. You got to come
I
next
missed.
year. I promise you'll come.
I will do my best.
She wriggled out promising. We all heard it. What you on? What's going on for the rest of the week? What have you got planned?
Yeah, I mean, not much else. I have my big improv debut this evening, which I'm excited about. I know. I was getting nervous earlier and thinking, gosh, I feel very unprepared, and then I was lovingly reminded that it turns out it's improv, so you can't prepare anyway. Thing. So, no, it should be really exciting. And then the rest of the weekend, just kind of chill and catching up with friends, and it should be good. What about you, Leo? What you got on
Well,
the
I
docket?
take a breath, right? Because you'll do the improv. It'll be really exciting, but probably quite nerve wracking. And then you'll drink wine afterwards, surely in celebration. And so the weekend,
I
then
love
you
it.
can take a breath and celebrate, right?
That's right. Yeah. There you go.
Well, I'm just focused on being a dad. I was obviously traveling. I was bad dad this week, so I'm just trying to focus on being good dad. But yeah, it's nice. Lots of time with the kids. I'm going to pick my daughter up early from daycare today, and spend a bit of time with her. So yeah, family time. And my parents are coming, so yeah,
Oh,
really,
yeah.
really looking forward to that.
That sounds awesome.
Gang, if you've enjoyed listening to us today, please hit like, share, subscribe, and all the usual social places, and interact with us. There's so many topics here I'd love to discuss. There's the let's go back over, the rural, over tourism, secluded Hutopia deal, which I think I'd be really interested to hear from property managers about how that affects where they're trying to get supply, or if you buy property, how that affects where you're thinking about buying land and such. And then this Airbnb co-hosting point, I think we're going to come back to this time and time again. So yeah, please get in touch. And until next time, look after yourselves. Cheers.
Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Lodgify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.